Do. Redirecting Twitch. And I'm putting it down there. So if anyone comments, they comment. All right. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. There is a network error. Okay, cool. I got to do this one more time. There we go. Yes, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are finally getting this ball rolling. My guess is, I'm just going to say it, Mr. Rik Offenberger. He is the head of First Comics News. He was also the big reason how I got to San Diego Comic-Con this year. So I'm going to say this again. Thanks for that. That was awesome.
Oh, sure. It's hard to get there from Canada. My job was just to get you in the door.
Yeah. I was in Dallas Airport for 6 hours. That was brutal. That was brutal. It's like when I went to my return flight, it was like, I'm going through San Fran. It was like no problems that way, but Dallas was just like, oh. But it was worth it when I got there.
Oh, good. I'm glad you had a good time.
Yeah. But we are here because you have launched another G-Men Kickstarter.
Yeah, just this morning at 9 o'clock, just 3 hours ago.
Yeah. Excited?
Very much so. Very much so. We keep everything kind of rolling. This is our 7th Kickstarter. Art is already underway on the first comic for our 8th Kickstarter when we haven't closed out the 7th one. It's just we try and make sure that we don't stop moving forward. But we still have a few things to close out for this one. I still have a Steve Butler cover we're waiting on. We are still finishing up the last few pages on 2 of our comics. We actually have 7 comics and a handbook in this Kickstarter, and then we have some add-ons. So most of them are fully complete. We do have a level where you get to join the comic with your original superhero, join the G-Men, and we had opened up 6 slots for that. But 2 people pledged twice to get both of their characters in. One of the people who pledged had his son pledged with him, and so it was a team. And then the other guy had 2 characters he wanted to get in. So we eventually opened up another slot so that we could get 6 backers.
Yeah. So I mean, it just wow! Congratulations, you got a father-son duo. Are they actually a legit father-son team in the story, or are they just?
No, it's a male and female team.
Wow.
Captain Physics. Captain Physics was actually in one of our prior comics. He was in Agent Kirby #3, and he's making a return appearance with his partner, Lady Physics.
Okay, so that sounds like there's a real temptation to go down a pun route. There's a real temptation there, but it sounds like honestly really cool.
Well, in my Lynx comic, I have a team that's a male and female. Lynx ends with an X, and so the plural is also Lynx, sort of like deer is the plural of deer.
Yes.
And so they're Lynx, and it's 2 of them. And I had a villain in Agent Kirby #5 called Action, who was the Nazi version of Agent Kirby. And one of the artists sent me a picture of a girl teammate for him.
Oh, geez.
And so we ended up adding her into the Lynx comic as well. And then you have to kind of figure out what you're going to call them when the first character is called Action. Do you really call her Lady Action?
Oh, geez.
We called her Action Girl.
Oh, Action Girl's what you went with? Okay. Ms. Action would have worked too, but
Ms. Action would have worked too. But you want to make it so that.
Well, yeah, because the moment you add a joke to the name, they can't be taken seriously anymore, and that ruins a character sometimes, especially if Action's supposed to be like the antithesis of Agent Kirby, right? You don't want him to be a joke,
right?
But it sounds like you got this well rendered. Like your organizational skills, I must admit, are genuinely impressive. One of the big things.
Well, it's I've got a great team. I really do, and it's all it's me, it's Jim Burrows, it's Eric Bennett, it's Gilbert Monsanto. We've got a lot of other people on the team, but those were the 4 of us are the ones who started doing everything. It was me, Jim, and Eric as the creators and the people who put together G-Man Comics, and then Gilbert was our artist.
Okay.
And Eric had found Gilbert through Gilbert Monsanto's Arena, which is a fun place where you can get some art of your original character, as he does rounds where one fights another.
Okay. So that's cool.
And
So
that's where I met Gilbert. And Gilbert said, we can make a comic. And I said, no, we can't. I had worked for Archie for 10 years. I knew exactly what went into making a comic. And I didn't think we could do it. But I was wrong and they were right. And now we're at our 4th anniversary. And this campaign will end with us producing 45 different comics.
So you've become, like I said, you like your efficiency is to be commended, but also the qualities also should be commended as well.
Well, thank you.
So I'm gonna ask it like this, because you mentioned your Archie Comics background. Does your
Yeah.
experience? So I gotta ask this, like going into like now that you're, for lack of a better term, an independent on Kickstarter, right?
Yes.
You have right. So does your editorial experience hinder you sometimes because you know what's possible and they're challenging you sometimes in a good way to push you out of your comfort zone?
Well, I mean, at Archie, I was the public relations guy. I didn't
Oh,
work in editorial. I mean,
okay.
I saw what was going on. I talked to the people. I was marginally around the process, but I also work in California, and Archie's headquartered in New York. So my direct, interaction with the editorial process is less than my conversation with Victor about what his experiences were like when I talked to him and how he dealt with it and what things went on. But I certainly did see things. I certainly watched how things moved. I was there when they were talking about planning things, as we're talking about doing promotions. I was, you know what I mean? And so I had peripheral experience with it. I can't do the production end of it that needs to be done to get everything done. And Jim is very, very good at that. And, Eric found most of our early artists. Some of them found us. But once you start publishing, people find you.
Oh, absolutely. No,
Yeah.
it's so true. It is so true. In various ways, no matter what industry. Like with me, I always get like when I do these because I've done so many of these shows. People go, "How do you do this?" It's like, yeah, magic. It's like sometimes it kind of feels like magic when you're putting together a project, like any kind of project. And comics, because of for lack of a better term, the musician band like process of the fact that you have a team of people putting together these books. I always feel like there's small miracles every time they come out.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is that I started off having not done the creative end of this business. And so when I wrote my first story, I sent it to Lou Mugen, who had worked at Marvel and did a lot of work for Heroic. And I'd known him for quite some time. And I just had him look at my script, and he was my original script editor. And he put me through some paces, and he got me, up to speed on where I was short and not some of the most pleasant terms, and where I needed, and where things were going well. And so that was a process. Lewis passed, so now Chris has stepped up to do some script editing for me. Chris was my proofreader when I was Archie.
Okay.
And so, in the process, I like to, I'm sitting there by myself writing my script, and then I pass it off to the script editor, who's a different set of eyes. Because sometimes when you're writing something, you know how everything goes in your head. And it makes sense to you because in your head, you fill in the blanks of things you may have skipped. But when the next person reads it, they say, well, I don't understand this. And you understood it so well because all you do is think about it, that you miss some basics. Or you miss some steps, you miss some clarity.
It happens all the time, even when I'm writing. Like, even I've written for probably about 15, 20 years. I would say the last 10 years I've been at my most professional level. We'll just say that. Yeah, sometimes you're like, I'm a genius when I put down the script. And then when you actually read it afterwards, sometimes you catch it yourself,
Yes.
but we all have blind spots. Like there's no how to put this. We need editors. We all do
Yeah.
because we need someone from the outside looking in going, hey, by the way, have you thought about this? And sometimes you're like,
Yeah.
yes, I did. Here. but not here.
Right, exactly.
And it's
What's not
important.
on the page doesn't help.
No.
Eh,
No,
eh,
and sometimes the things you care about, and this is the other aspect too. Sometimes prose is guiltier as this than comics, I think. But you sometimes have this really, you go down this rabbit hole and you write this great little thing. You think this is awesome. Then your editor goes to you, "Why is this in the story?" And you really don't have a good reason for it other than you thought it was awesome in that moment. And
Yes.
right, it happens. Like these are things that like we're human beings and we create like I think it's one of the best parts about creation is the idea in our head and what actually hits the page there is never quite the same thing. And I think that's wonderful actually. It makes us look at things differently.
Well, Gilbert is doing the art on Agent Kirby this time, and he's doing the art on Sergeant Flag for me. And when I send him the script, what's going on in my mind is not what's going on in his mind.
No.
And so when I get it back, it's really cool because sometimes he has better ideas than I do. Sometimes he just has different ideas, and when I see them, they're cool. And it's nice to collaborate, and that part's the nice part about the collaboration. And then I've got Alan, who did Agent Kirby #2. That's when the first thing I did with him, and he's doing Lynx this time out. And it's interesting with Lynx because Mark Beecham, I'd always been a fan. I liked his stuff on Samaree for Continuity Comics way back in the day.
I
And I
remember
liked
that,
the
yeah.
stuff he did for Impact Comics on Jaguar.
Okay, I never read. Okay, so on the Impact comic line, for me, it was Comet and the Web. That
Okay.
was those are the two. Jaguar, just for whatever reason, I like. Again, it's like everything else. There's good and there's stuff you miss in everything. That one I
Yeah.
missed, but I did see him in Sam Marie. I remember Continuity Comics with a bit of fondness. But yeah, it was good stuff.
So I asked him for a Lynx cover.
Yeah.
And he produced one for us. And yeah, they appear to be in their bathing suits, like a bonfire.
Nice.
And it's very pretty. And so then, and he'd done the cover while I was working on the prior issue. So I showed it to Jim, who is the managing editor for this. And he said, well, now we need a story at the beach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do.
So the story takes some twists and turns. And we end up at a clothing optional beach in Mexico.
Nice.
And then we tell Alan, well, you're going to have to be very careful how you draw this because we're a PG comic and you've got to draw this whole thing so that it fits into a PG world. We want to be no different than, say, Marvel or DC, as far as the level of violence or nudity. No nudity.
Yeah.
Or at least no frontal nudity.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just it. It's a lot of silhouettes. It's a lot of stuff at the distance. It's a lot of stuff of you create the idea of nudity, not necessarily show nudity.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have some fun with that. And it's a lot of fun at least a lot of fun for me. And it's fun for me when I write it, and then it's like Christmas every day as the pages slowly come in. You get a page, you get a page, and then you get another page, and you're looking at this, and this looks cool. Then it gets colored, and you're looking at it get colored. And until it's lettered, it doesn't really look like a comic to me. It's a work in progress until the lettering's on there. Once the lettering's on there, then it really feels like a comic.
So I have a weird like view of in my head, I have a goal with every story I write in comics, and that's this. If you took my words out of it, could you still get the gist of the story?
Well, that's a good storyteller. If you don't have a good storyteller you're working with, if they can't do a story flow, but I mean, that's up to the artist. That's more the artist than as the writer, you convey the idea of what's going on. You come up with the basic idea, but the artist, the way they do a page layout, the way they make the story flow, that's what makes it so you can read it without the dialogue.
Yeah. Well, I do think there is a small part of this too. It's sometimes when I write a script, this is how I look at it. Like, how am I conveying my information to the artist, right? Because that's important too. Because that will dictate how the flow of the story goes. But for me, so right now, I have a story on Kickstarter too right now, where I'm just part of an anthology. So I'm seeing now all the colored. I just got the colored pages up, all of them for the issue today. Literally right before getting a hold of you, I was just like, this looks so cool. I actually want to hang page 8, the last page of my story, on the wall because it's my favorite like expression in the whole thing. It's the bottom 2 panels. But
I have found that if you just need a one-off poster, you can get Walgreens to print that thing for you.
Yeah, you know, I'm probably gonna do that. I'm just gonna let them know I'm doing that at the kind of stuff. I'm gonna mount this on my wall because this is just really freaking cool. And like, no, it is an amazing, like, watching comics get put together is an amazing process. Like, I got to watch like putting it together, like the consultation of what the story is, like questions the artists ask. Then it's like, then you see the first pages, like the thumbnails first, and then you see the final, like, or semi-final, like the black and whites, pencils and inks, and it's just like, whoa, this is my story. Then you see the colors, and you're like, whoa, this is my story, right? And so sometimes if I can see, it's like, oh, this is really good. And Paul Gorey, the illustrator of the book, did a fantastic job. Now I'll see it lettered. And I always feel like lettering is the most underappreciated part of comics because they are in some ways one of the most important cogs of the skeleton. And if it's done well, almost no one notices them.
Well, it also depends on how many special effects you do. It depends on the types of fonts you use. But yeah, the idea is that it makes it readable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Charlie had been a member of the first Kickstarter I did. He had joined Agent Kirby #1 with Spider Squirrel. How did you get involved in the Spider Squirrel universe?
Charlie asked me to write a story.
How did you meet Charlie? How did you meet Charlie?
Yeah, I met Charlie through the Manitoba. I don't know if you're aware of. So this is before the pandemic. I don't know what it's like now, but before the pandemic. So Calgary has a good novel writing community. Winnipeg, Manitoba has an amazing comic book community. And through that comic book community, I met Charlie. Oh, indirectly, right? I met Charlie through a mutual friend of ours. And then we've kept in touch over the years, off and on. And what ended up happening there was, like, I have done some comic writing in the past myself. And he was just looking, like, he likes the idea of bringing collaborators into his universe because A, he likes seeing different takes on his characters sometimes because it gives him ideas, and B, he finds people he wants to work with down the road, right? So I looked at he goes, hey, is there anyone you want to play with? So I looked at he's got this amazing, like, who's who handbook kind of thing for his universe. Yeah. So the character I looked at his heroes and his villains. I thought, okay, Soryu could be fun. That was one of the 7 Ronin, and that'd be the hero. I read his profile. It's like, oh, he's a family man. Okay, this is kind of cool. Then I looked at the villain side, and I looked at these 2 sisters, and I was like, they're little kids. They're not much older than his kids. Okay, I think I have a fun story here. So, and I pitched it to him. He liked it. I wrote the story. He got Paul Gorey to draw it, and the rest is history.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. I can write too sometimes, Rick. Don't tell anybody, especially my editor at First Comics. I can write, right?
Oh, no, I know.
Yeah, so
I published because I want to write. I want to write my characters. So it's a different experience when he wants to get his characters out in the world more than he can produce. You know what I mean? Where he wants to collaborate with other writers and people.
It's a fine line, right? Because, like, okay, so there comes a point, right? Like, Neil Adams, I'm going to use continuity comics as a model because I truly admire the attempt Neil Adams did with that world, like just how involved he was across the universe. It's not that dissimilar to you, actually, with what you're doing with G-Men, although you're going at a smaller scale than Neil tried to do it.
Yeah, thank God. Little bit smaller.
What?
A little bit smaller.
No, yeah, because that was insane. Like, what Neil Adams tried to do was crazy because he was doing, I think, something like, I think it was 10 books at one point with continuity. At one point, there was 10 books on the line, and he was involved with all of them at once, right? And some capacity here and there. It was a monumental feat, folks. And some of those books are really fun. You should definitely, anyone that's listening to this should check out some of those runs. They're great. But eventually I think it burned him out because there's just, you can only do so much. Um, but the idea, I think there comes a point with every universe to make it grow. You have to go, okay, who can I trust to do this, right?
Yeah,
Right. And I think with Charlie, like Charlie's just he's just like, let's do this now. Let's try a bunch of different things now and let's see who sticks, who doesn't. Which is a good way also again to find people to work with too. Go on
yeah,
a small scale, see who works, who fits with you. And then on a larger scale, let's say, oh, you got a bigger story, right? Well, now you got a bigger story. And you got the right people now because you know they did it way here. It's
exactly.
good. Yeah, it's good business. And it's also just like there's going to come a point. I mean, if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to be like, well, I can't do all these characters the way justice the way I'd like to. And then you're going to be like, which ones are closer to me? Like what's closer to my heart? Because those are the ones you'll keep. And then which ones are going to be like, okay, I like you, but I just can't. I have to pick and choose. And then you'd be like, well, who can do this kind of story? Well, then you go and then you look at your friends and say, well, who will take care of this story well, right? And that's what you do, right? And there's a point with that. Like you might not, like you may not be there now, but let's say you keep like again you're at 8 Kickstarters. Let's say you get to the point where you're doing this on a, dear God, I don't want to say this to you because I don't want to curse you, monthly basis with your Kickstarters. You might get to a point there where you like, I can't do everything creatively anymore.
Well,
And
the
that's
thing is, we release 8 books at once.
yeah.
It wasn't intentional that 8 books at once. It just came out that way.
Yeah.
But the idea was we're going to do 2 Kickstarters a year, and we're going to release all the books in the 2 Kickstarters. And the idea being that that's the way the Kickstarter model runs. Because we need to do a little bit of publicity before the Kickstarter launches, or no one knows it's going to launch.
Exactly.
So we do that for 30 days. Then the
Yes.
Kickstarter runs for another calendar month. So that's 2 months. Then it takes 2 weeks for Kickstarter to release the funds. So we lose a half a month there. Once we get the funds, we turn everything over to the printer, and it takes the printer a minute to calculate out, because Kablam does our printing and our shipping, 100% of everything.
Cool. Kablam's good, and Kablam's a very good company.
So they have to figure out what the postage is for every single individual order internationally, how many of each books they are going to print of each one, and calculate out the printing, shipping, packaging, and all that. So that takes a minute. And by the time they're done printing and shipping, that's another 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So now we've used up 4 months.
Yes.
Okay. So now the Postal Service has the book. And if you live in the continental United States, you usually get the book within a week. If you live in Brazil, if you live in the Philippines, if you live in England, if you live in Canada, you get the book later. And how much later is sometimes a lot later. And we like people to have the book for 30 days before they know they liked it, before we ask them to join us again for the next Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So absolutely. By the time they've had it and read it, that's when we're starting promotion for the next Kickstarter.
Well, absolutely.
And so we're on 6 months. We're planning August and we're planning February, and I've already written everything for February.
Yeah.
We're, you know what I mean? And so as we do this Kickstarter, we will be starting to fund the next Kickstarter. Each Kickstarter funds the next one.
Yeah, which is again a smart model. When you get to that point, it's just incredible. Like I said, I that's why I said I wasn't trying to curse you, because everything you just said, right?
Well, also we save people money on shipping.
Yeah.
Because if you gang ship the books, it's about the same price to ship 5 as it is to ship 1.
Yes, it is.
And so if they order more books, their postage doesn't go up exponentially. They don't pay 5 times the shipping. They just pay incrementally a little more shipping, because it just adds a little bit of weight to it.
Yeah, no.
But it's the same Gemini 2 mailer. It's the initial postage. The extra ounce is cheaper than the first ounce. So we try and make that a little more palatable too, because they can't get our books in comic shops. At least the shipping isn't horrible. But I know that Charlie uses a variety of platforms, because one of his is on Kickstarter, then the next one's on Indiegogo, and then the next one's on Zoop. so that he's got them running all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's also just the fact that there's different audiences in different places, right?
Yeah,
Kickstarter,
absolutely.
yeah, Kickstarter is by far the largest audience. I think, to be honest, just as an aside, I checked out the Kickstarter panel at San Diego, and I checked out the more traditional publishing things. I was a little alarmed at what I saw with the traditional publishers a little bit, but because I'm just watching how I had the opportunity to talk with some agents and stuff like that, and they're looking at Kickstarter as the model of the future. They're talking about it openly now, and it's an interesting dynamic to see how much Kickstarter has changed the game. I thought that that was probably the most important panel I went to the whole weekend, because this is like watching how they're doing things. But the thing is, Kickstarter's Zoom, no, sorry, Zoop Zor. Did I get it right? The Kickstarter, Indiegogo. I can't remember the Z one. ZOO. I always forget
There's Zoop, ZOOP,
yeah, Zoop. That's what I
and
was
then
thinking.
there's Fund My Comic.
Yeah, there's fun. Yeah, so all these places are basically different audiences with different clientele, and but they're all collectors. They're all people that want comics. And one of the things I think that's you're doing that's really smart is you're packaging everything at once, because I think that's the way it's going to go, right? It's better. It's a better investment for a collector to get everything at once than it is over a period of time, because of how shipping is going right now, right? Unless that changes, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that might be that might be a future issue, is that you put together everything from all your Kickstarters in one shipment for the month. So you get a monthly, like if you joined a comic subscription service, you know what I mean? Where if you join, Mile High's Nice Club, they ship to you once a month with all the comics you ordered, so that they're not shipping to you. I mean, they will ship to you every week, but it's a fortune. You pay more for the shipping than you do for the comics. But they have the model where they ship to you once a month. It seems to me that at some point, for all these independent publishers, rather than charging everyone $6, $6 on every single Kickstarter, it would behoove everyone if you could put together one bigger box,
Yeah.
and ship the whole thing for less money.
Well, I think that's where it's going to inevitably go. But also now you got to think, okay, so I got this audience here. I'm cultivated this. Where will any of these other platforms fit what I'm doing as well, or well enough to justify doing a campaign over there, right? And the answer to some creators, I think, is yes. I don't know if it's every book, but I do think with some, there's definitely an appeal to that. And it's one of those moments where I think that's very much a personal decision, right? Do you want to go on those kind of campaigns on a regular basis? Because again, I mean, I'm sure as much as you enjoy talking to me, there's also going to be those moments in time where it's like, what's great? A vacation once in a while, for I don't have to campaign every single month. Because burnout, constantly marketing yourself is a real thing. So I could definitely see, the appeal of what you're doing. Like once every 6 months, you build up accordingly, you market, but you're doing it at a more, I wouldn't say leisurely exactly, but more gradually, right? Whereas someone that's always on, right, never stops.
No, I appreciate the downtime in between too, because I have a day job, and I have a real life, and I have family, and you know what I mean. You can push. There's always some stress with comics. You know what I mean. This is especially because we're doing more than one.
Yeah.
I have. I'm doing Agent Kirby. I'm doing Lynx. I'm doing Sergeant Flag, and then I'm doing 1/3 of G-Men Comics United, and or G-Men United. And so for that, I'm stressed about, are my things coming in on time? Will we hit the deadline? In Agent Kirby this time, I've got a Halloween themed story. I was at Sam's Club last year at, probably August. and they rolled in the General Mills cereal, the Frankenberry and the Count Chocula. I loved
Yes.
those as a kid. And so I said, I'm going to do a story where they're the villains.
Nice.
And so I wrote that last year around this time. And I wanted it to be in everyone's hands for Halloween. So I'm doing my math backwards. You know, we got to do this for the August Kickstarter. It'll end August 31st. We'll get the funds. We'll get the funds September 15th, and everyone will get the book before Halloween.
Yes.
And so I calculated that out. But of course, that means that we can't really have any hiccups in the process and have to push this back, or everyone gets it after Halloween and it's less fun.
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually a little jealous. We can't get Frankenberry in Canada. We can get Count Chocula, but we can't get Frankenberry.
With them, I toyed around with the idea of, none of them are actually the General Mills characters or the Universal characters. They're all our versions of those.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
I toyed around with the idea of painting the characters in the cereal colors, so that the Frankenstein monster would be pink. But I figured that was probably not the best choice at the end.
You might have gotten away with it. You might have. The story has to be very much more tongue in cheek if you're doing it that way, though.
Yeah, and so this seemed to be more fun. I mean, the basic story is they want to be superheroes, and so they come into the federal building to register. And then, like you see in the Munsters, everyone's scared to death of the monsters that come in the door. And everything that could go wrong does go wrong, and they end up being the villains of the story.
It's not that's sometimes the way it goes, and sometimes like it's a good gag too. It's a really, really good gag. If you could have some serious fun with that.
Yeah,
so,
I did.
Yeah, actually you did. Yeah, right. So so without giving away too much, so it's coming in this issue.
It's going to be in this issue, yes. And then we have links ending up at the clothing optional beach. Okay. It was interesting because the main villain throughout the whole universe for my characters, is a guy named Murder Hornet.
Murder Hornet.
Okay, and Murder Hornet is a billionaire industrialist who has a lot of ties to the government. So he has a stand-in, sort of like Tony Stark had James Rhodes as a stand-in for Iron Man, so people wouldn't know he was Iron Man.
Yes.
So he has a stand-in, and Jim comes up to me one day and says, "How attached are you to Murder Hornet?" I said, "Well, it's pretty important to all of my stories and all my storylines." He said, "Would you mind if I kill him?" I said, "Well, that would kind of hurt." And he said, No, not Henry. I wanted to kill Jeffrey, the stand-in. So he kills him in his story.
Yeah.
And then so we start off links with the new Murder Hornet before we end up at the beach. And the new Murder Hornet also shows up in the Agent Kirby story, because I like the way Marvel used to do their universe, where you didn't have to buy this big cross, or at least when I was a kid, they hadn't created the big crossover yet, not to like Secret Wars. So, Daredevil would just show up in Spider-Man. The Human Torch just showed up one episode, one issue, and just they're just hanging out. They're all in Manhattan together, and so they all end up seeing each other without it being a big deal.
Well, the whole thing is like the whole idea initially of Marvel was like, New York's a city. People live here. Doesn't matter who, people live here. The Kingpin might go just be shopping at Walgreens one day, where Spider-Man just so happens to be, because he's a human being at the end of the day, right? And that's the best. I think those are the best kind of crossovers, to be perfectly honest with you, because they're always neat. My favorite Marvel movie post credit was the Captain America reading ads thing. That was funny. Yeah. But I liked it because it was I like human touch crossover stuff a lot better than I like I think we all got evented out. They're just there. I mean, it's cool once in a while to build a big event, but it should be once every 3-4 years, not one. I get why they do it, but I wish it would be once every 3-4 years, because it would feel more special if they did it that way.
Yeah, I had this idea for a crossover between the 3 books that I write, and I was going to do this alien invasion story. And then I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking, well, I have some backers who buy 1 book and don't buy all 3. And I don't want someone to get part of the story.
Mm.
So I boiled down the essence of it, and there was a lot of fluff. It turned out that I had links on the ground dealing with the the problems that happen to the regular people during the course of an alien invasion, and so that wasn't really part of the whole abduction story and the the whole fighting the aliens. So I squeezed it all into one issue of Sergeant Flag this time. So we got some aliens and we got an abduction, and I think that it turned out really nicely. And I was happy to have the characters guest star in the one issue without it being you have to buy all the comics.
Yeah, I know. Like you, I truly like. Everybody loves team ups. I love the idea of a good team up story. I don't necessarily want to buy 20 issues, or if there is a crossover. Do you remember what Valiant originally did with Unity? Or, like the idea behind
I was
it?
a retailer, yeah, when that came out.
Yeah. So what I liked about that was every creator kind of got a chance to kind of tell their own, with a handful of exceptions, got to tell their own story in the universe. Like Archer and Armstrong's take on Unity was vastly different than than um than Solar's take on it, and I thought it
Yes.
was smarter. It was smarter because if I just wanted to read Archer and Armstrong and not worry about the big event was there, but it wasn't required to enjoy my single issue, and that's kind of how I feel like it. If you're gonna have a good story, let the creators like use the toys a crossover can give you, and and let it enhance the story they're telling. Because when it's over, right? Creators still got to write that book the month after the crossover's done. Let them build with it. Otherwise, do what you do. Tell the best story you can in one single issue and have a blast.
Yeah, I try and not continue my stories from issue to issue in the books that I write, because if someone just buys, if this is their first Kickstarter and they buy the book, I don't want them to get the middle chapter and not know what's going on. When I was a kid, that was a problem I had with the first issue of Spider-Man I ever got,
Mm-hmm.
is that, and I was little,
Mm-hmm.
and my parents got me a Spider-Man and a Fantastic Four and I think a Superman,
Okay.
and this Fantastic Four story was easy enough to follow what was going on, and I'd liked all these cartoons, and Superman was always done in one, and usually in those days they had like a little 8-page backup, so it wasn't even a full 20-page story.
No.
Yeah, and but the Spider-Man story had things coming from the previous issue which I didn't own, and continuing into the next issue, which I would never be able to find as a 7-year-old.
No.
And so Marvel became much more popular with me and much more of a favorite when I actually had access to get to the liquor store or the 7-Eleven by myself. You know what I mean? Or when I was, maybe I was younger than 7, because probably by 7 I could. But you know what I mean? But when I couldn't make it to the store by myself, my parents weren't concerned that I have issue 12 and don't have issue 13. You know what I mean? And issue 14's out and I missed it. But with Marvel, I ended up subscribing.
Yeah.
So that I wouldn't miss an issue. And I ended up subscribing to DC too. It was just easier for me because my parents didn't live close to a store. I would have to get them to take me.
Yes, and they didn't always have the time or the inclination to do so. So this way, you got your issues, and everybody was happy.
Exactly. Yeah, because the thing is that on the newsstand they'd get 2 or 3 of each issue, but sometimes you weren't the kid who got there in time.
No, you weren't. Sometimes another kid was like, "Hey, I got my issue, and that's just the way it's going to be," and that was it. You were out. You were out. I miss spin rack days. I got the tail end of that. Like my first comic was Starman number 14. It was a Superman team up. Like team ups are fun when they're done really, really, really well, and yeah, and then from there though, I mean, this was near. Actually, I should ask this: when you were, not to age you, there were comic stores as prevalent when you were a kid as they were when I was a kid. Like there was a bunch.
No, there were no comic stores when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was a kid before they invented comic stores.
Okay.
Okay, so you had to get, and then I when I got a little older, my father introduced me to used bookstores, and so I got back issues from used bookstores that also carried comics. So I'd sit there with the phone book, calling up used bookstores to see if they carried comics or not, because not all of them did.
Yeah.
And so then I got a lot of old comics through used bookstores. But when they start, the used bookstores weren't allowed to carry new comics or new magazines. I don't know why, but that was the way the deal worked if they sold used periodicals.
Yeah.
And eventually when they opened comic stores, I started going. And anyone who's bought comics through comic stores doesn't know the sheer horror of finding out a month later you missed an issue because they were bi-monthly. So they only came out every 8 weeks and you didn't know exactly when to expect it. And then you see the next issue on the shelf and realized you missed one.
Yes.
And there's no, I mean, then it becomes a whole hunt. You have lists on piece of paper of the comics you're missing with the holes in your collection, and you go from place to place trying to find them and fill them. And now you just take your phone out of your pocket, go on eBay and order the missing issue you're missing, and it shows up at your house in 3-4 days.
Sometimes eBay can be a trip in itself, but you know, I remember like back when I was hunting down back issues of Silver Surfer was one of my holy grails back in the day, and
I love Silver Surfer.
Everybody, most people do. Like, he was such a cool character. I can't afford the Silver Age Silver Surfer because some of that stuff's expensive, like really expensive stuff. But the modern stuff, like I remember getting it like from like Jim Starlin's run with Thanos all the way like from even prior to that. I would go to this, like I would go to these flea markets, and actually I'm doing it the other way. I would go hunt the Silver Surfer issues I was looking for in this flea market. And this guy in Grand Bend would had the whole run. So every week I would just pick up more and more issues just to catch up on, like, so I got this Silver Surfer stuff way back when I was a kid, and I was like excited. People don't know that joy today, except in the few places where flea markets still exist. There's one in Calgary. Now I'm getting rid of some of my comics, right? That's actually one of the ones I'm debating. Like, do I bring the Silver Surfers out again, or do I just keep them? I think I'm going to keep them. But even so, it's just like I'm now the back issue bin for somebody else. Seeing people hunting down
exactly.
This. Yeah, it's a weird, surreal way of giving back to the industry.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, when I was so the holy grail for me when I'm buying comics and I can't find what I'm looking for is the Green Lantern Green Arrow number 76.
Yes.
And I bought it from Chuck Brzezinski before he was Mile High, when he was just advertising in Marvel as Chuck Brzezinski. Okay. And you sent him a quarter and he sent you his list. And then you ordered from his list hoping someone else didn't order the book before you ordered it. And if you bought something from the list, he gave you a 25-cent discount to give you back your quarter.
It's not a bad way of doing business. It's not a bad way.
And it was $12. Yeah. And $12 was the world at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It was the most expensive comic I ever bought at $12 because comics were 20 cents.
Absolutely. No, it's such a different. Now I saw Green Lantern Green Arrow at San Diego. Now I grant you, because San Diego's a little inflated, but even so, I was looking at the price. It's like, you know, but my holy grail for comics, the one I would like to own, is Fantastic 448. You know why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think that the older you get, the price of comics are still just as astronomically too expensive for you.
Yes.
When you were looking at the first at Fantastic Four as a kid, it was too expensive for you, but you look back now and you say, oh, that was real reasonable. But it was such an amount higher than the amount of money you had to spend on comics, you know, by such a multiple. That multiple is still the same.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Making more money. The inflation in the book is just because you make more money.
No, it's just that, no, it's the way it is. Like, what I've learned in this life is you gotta choose what you want to invest in. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And you have to be, how do I put this? You have to make some honest decisions. Sometimes, like, those opportunities do come. Like, again, me going to San Diego was an investment. It was a decision. Like, I could have stayed if I want, even with your invite, if I wanted to. Because again, as you point out, I'm from Canada. Coming here, it was not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to do. And my money, and my money right now, we're both laughing at my money, just for different reasons. You're laughing slightly out of pity. I'm laughing slightly out of despair. But that's right, right? Just the value of the dollar, right? But even so, it was, it was a worthwhile investment for me because, again, for what I want to do, I wanted to meet some of the people I've had the pleasure of meeting, including you, right, online.
Yeah.
But also it's the opportunities that are there in San Diego. I would not get this chance. I'm not going to get another chance like this. I mean, maybe next year I'll go back, but that opportunity, I had to make a decision what opportunities were important to me, if that makes
Yes,
sense, right?
absolutely.
And it's true whether I support a Kickstarter. It's true whether I want to buy Fantastic Four 48. It's true whether you want to buy Green Lantern, Green Arrow 76. Whenever you buy it, right? But
Right.
you gotta choose in this life what's important to you, and what investments count for you. What are your priorities, right? Because I still could do it. I still could get Fantastic Four 48. Do I want to pay the price for it right now? No. I have my own goals and my own life and my own dreams. But one day that opportunity will come and I'll be like, yeah, I want it. Right?
Well, I'm pretty sure you have a reprint of that somewhere.
Somewhere. Yes.
You see, because for me, my father bought me Secret Origins of DC Superheroes, Stan Lee's Origin of Marvel Heroes, Stan Lee's Son of Origin of Marvel Heroes,
nice,
and Bring on the Bad Guys. And so with those books, I got a good cross-reference of both universes as a kid. And I got the origin stories of all the characters that were major characters in both universes. And that kind of set me up so that I'm still reading comics to this day.
Yeah. And that's it. Like we all love the hobby. One thing, I went to your panel with Crusaders, and you guys are all passionate about all of that stuff, right? Yeah. And I think that was, again, you're more into it than I'll be. I like some of those characters, but not like you love them. Yeah, that's cool. We all have our passions. We all have what makes those little things, I call them the little things in life, that give you joy. And watching Dean Haspel, watching some of the other people that were on that panel, y'all love that stuff. And and those things matter. Those are the things.
That's how we became G-Man Comics.
Yeah, exactly.
It was accidental. In the 40s, there was the Shield G-Man Club.
Yeah.
And in the G-Man Club, I was doing some mock covers with someone else. Yeah. And he was drawing them and I was writing the mock story that didn't exist, just a paragraph blurb as if it did exist. And they were G-Man Comics because it was the G-Man Club. And somehow we went from doing mock covers to actually making comics, and the name was just already attached to it.
Nice. Yeah, no,
with our own characters now, but still.
And I think the reason I brought this up is in a small way. It's not just about this, but in a small way, this is a love letter to the characters you loved back in the day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, everything I write is inspired by everything I read, whether it's comics or otherwise. But there's a certain natural flow of humor that I like in comics too, that happens between the characters as opposed to a slapstick moment. I don't want them to trip and fall on their face.
No.
You know what I mean? Off the carpet. I don't want this to be, like a humor book. But I do like a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of barbs that people give to each other in real life to happen in the comic.
Because it's real.
Yeah.
Right. Like life can be. So my favorite comic book creator that does this better than anybody else is Peter David. He does. I mean,
Peter David's very good at that. Yes.
Yeah. No, he's just fantastic at it. Right. And he can make you laugh in one scene, and then the next scene he's got you like in tears because but it's light. He's not going out of his way to tell a slapstick joke. He's just like something that we all kind of connect to and can laugh at, right? In that moment. And those are the best. Again, comics, like any story, I think is best when it has real elements we can relate to, right? Banter back and forth is real. It's how, laughter, telling jokes, like egging each other on. It helps us cope with sometimes some of the shit we see, right? Exactly. And and that's real, and that's what, and that's yeah, like all the Red Circle books have a little bit of that in them, a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And that's what set them apart back in the day, because sometimes, especially during Comics Code, the initial Comics Code area, right, either the comics were too slapstick, or sometimes took themselves too seriously, and they were a nice sweet
Well,
spot.
I think if we're talking about the Archie heroes,
Yeah.
switching gears a little, in the 40s, they were done straight, just like everyone else. You know what I mean? It was a new medium. But when and then in the 50s, they started off with Simon and Kirby relaunching The Shield and The Fly, and launching The Fly as a new book. But by the time the 60s rolled around, they're already publishing before Marvel is with superheroes, because
Yeah.
they're publishing in 59. And they're doing Batman TV show, the camp humor, before the Batman show launches. And they wrap up and finish publishing that whole line in 60, launches in 66.
Yeah.
So they're kind of done with that by the time that's, a TV show. But they're time they're coming back in the Silver Age than DC or Marvel's doing. And they were making all their money off Archie, which was humor. And so they were taking the heroes and doing them as they were done in the movie serials, to try and have the superheroes take themselves overly seriously in a ridiculous situation. And they liked camp humor. And obviously it did well enough. They ran 50 issues, and Jaguar and the Fly showed up in Laugh Comics and in Pep Comics, as well as their own titles. So it did well until it ran out of steam, until that joke wasn't as funny anymore. Also, Archie was cheaper to produce, and still is.
Yes.
And sold better, and still does. And that
Yeah.
is the problem that the Archie superheroes always face, is it's more expensive and more labor intensive to make superhero comics, and they don't sell as well for Archie as the Archie core characters do. And so that and not that they never stop, because the Archie heroes came back in the 70s. They had the Superhero Digest. They came back in the 80s with Red Circle when the direct market launched. They were the first ones there when the direct market launched. They were one of their original publishers with their Red Circle heroes, and they ran through the 80s. Licensed them to DC in the 90s, and DC decided that their heroes had gotten too dark and gritty after Frank Miller's run on Batman. And so they wanted to run a lighter group of heroes that was aimed at a more of an entry-level audience, so that who didn't like the grim and gritty, or just regular readers who didn't like the grim and gritty. So they launched the Impact universe with all the Archie characters, still classic characters, and they ran for its contract. At one point, they switched editors, and DC was going to do a darker version of the Archie characters. And Michael Silverclay asked to pull the plug on the project because he didn't want the characters presented differently.
No. And
they tried their own dark version, and when they saw the stuff that Kelly Jones produced, they canceled their line on their own when they tried it. And then they launched, DC licensed them again. They did a Dark Circle version where they did them all as miniseries and tried to do something high quality like HBO did.
Yes.
And that was the model they're looking at, is, looking at like The Sopranos, where it's 10 episodes of high quality TV, as opposed to monthly, as opposed to every single week for 26 weeks where it's not the same quality. And they were hoping to do that with their Dark Circle launch. And now all the superheroes are in the digest, mixed in with the Archie kids. And that may be the tack too. I think that if you're not, if DC is vanilla and Marvel is chocolate, Archie has to be strawberry, and strawberry is just something that looks different than chocolate and vanilla. And they have to be in that niche. Otherwise, the people who want chocolate are going to get chocolate where they get it. And the people who want vanilla are going to get vanilla where they get it.
Absolutely. No, but also, like, as you say, Archie that was their hit. One of the things sometimes you have to realize is sometimes you just have to roll with what brings you to the dance. And you can't blame someone that's like, hey, Archie, Jughead, Betty, Veronica, all those characters, they're easier to make and they're selling. Like, what do you do, right?
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is, why would you, if it were you, If it's not a big company, you know, and Archie's a mom and pop. I mean, it's not owned by a major corporation like Walt Disney or Warner Brothers. Still owned by the original families. If you're investing your own money and you got one project that gives you 10x and another project that gives you 5x on your investment, and then you got another project that gives you, you know, 2x.
Yeah.
Do you say make more of the ones that make 10x? Do you say make more of the ones that get 5x, or do you make more of the ones that make 2x? You know what I mean? And so it's an economic thing. Even if you want to have, you know, diversity in your line, you have to spend the money where it gives the best return as a business owner.
Yeah, no.
And so the fact that they continue to push the superheroes and put them out and try different things with the superheroes over and over again, I think is a testament to how much they love them.
Oh, sure. No, I agree with that. And it's also good business too, because there might come a day where that making 10x might only make 9 or 8x, and there might be a decline. So you want to at some point. You don't necessarily, again, you're not trying to replace your hit, but you're trying to have stuff. Even though let's say the Red Circle characters or Mighty Crusaders make 5x, and you get them to 6 or 7x. It's a little less pressure from your 10x, so you can keep making it special, right?
Yeah.
At some point down the road, right? It's good business to try to diversify a little bit, but at the end of the day, right? You got, to your point, you got to go with what brings you to the dance. And
well, you look to it like Marvel. Okay, there was a point at which the Punisher came out and it did tremendous as a miniseries with Mike Zeck.
Yes.
And then they did an ongoing series, and that did tremendous with the ongoing series. Absolutely. And then there was Punisher War Journal, and then you had John Romita Jr. on Punisher War Zone, and you had the Punisher Handbook, and then they couldn't sell Punisher at all, and all 3 titles were canceled.
Yeah.
And they haven't had a huge successful run since then. But they've never taken fire like that, you know, since. And so tastes change, and you have to be able to, as the publisher, you have to roll with that and give the audience what they want at the moment.
Yeah, and that's also sometimes that's why you'll see Archie go into supernatural elements, for example, or horror, or go back to being funny again, because the audience's tastes at the moment change. The core, however, remains the same. Mr. Rik, before we wrap this bad boy up, because this is your 8th campaign, is there a point? I want to ask this because you've gotten this down almost to a machine. Is there a point that you're still uncomfortable? Is there any discomfort with Kickstarters? Is there any a different challenge with each project each and every time, or is it, while there are bumps in the road, you're more used to them, for lack of a better term?
We're finished. This is the start of our 7th campaign, and we're already planning the 8th campaign before we start the 7th campaign. So we have a certain comfort and familiarity with it. However, Kickstarters does a real good job of enhancing their platform over time. This was the easiest looking platform. It was the easiest way to add add-ons. It was the easiest way to add product that we've had out of any of the campaigns. So the mechanics of putting the campaign together were easier for this campaign than they have been before. However, we have so many people working on so many different things. You feel the scramble at the end.
Oh yeah.
You know, as we're starting promotion for the comic, it's nothing but stress because, well, we're not done here, and we need this there, and we need to, you know what I mean? And oh wait, I need another page lettered here. No, we need to change this. This doesn't read quite right. And so there's never a point at which this isn't stressful.
Yeah.
But it's fun. And I get to share my stories with the world, and that part's fun too.
And that's what it's all about. 2 final questions here. 2 final questions, and
we'll
wrap this bad boy up. First one. We just mentioned Red Circle. Who's your favorite Red Circle character?
Oh, by far the Shield. Not even close. The Joe Higgins Shield in particular. Although I did like the Simon and Kirby Shield, there wasn't a lot of story with that. It didn't have the same history And so it never really, visually I liked the look, but it never took over the funness that I had for the Joe Higgins character.
Fair enough. And second, I mean, I mentioned G-Men as a love letter to the Crusaders. Um, but so I guess what I'm going to ask is, for the last thing is, might as well do the full Fonty pitch here. Who are the G-Men? What are they about? And how can people find them?
Okay, so the GMAT in Marvel, they did a superhero registration act, which is exactly the way I would see superheroes working in the real life. Because the superheroes are literally vigilantes going out in the streets enforcing justice. And they touch on that with Batman, where, you know, before Commissioner Gordon, the police were always after Batman. Mm-hmm. So we decided that all the superheroes are FBI agents. Okay. And so they just register with the FBI and they become part of the Cape superhero program. And it's they're Caped agents. And if you don't register, you're a villain by default because you're violating the law. And so I put together, I mean, some of my favorite runs in the Justice League had like everyone, and the Avengers had like everyone. So for us, all the superheroes in the universe are eligible to be part of the G-Men. And as I tell stories in the Agent Kirby book, he's Simon N. Kirby, the agent. As we tell stories, he picks the right heroes for the right team. But it took me 30 years from the time I wrote my first comic to actually get it in print, to go through all those steps and processes. And I wanted people to have a chance to do that too. So we have this thing where you can pledge to join the G-Men. You're a little late if you want to join this campaign, but we're back in February. And your character can become part of the team. So you get to get your character in print too. And so the team is always different in the book. They pull together a new team of new characters, and we get to share some of the backers' characters with the world as he takes a team of heroes to fight the villains. And in this case, they're going to be our characters and the backer characters going after the General Mills serial characters as told as not General Mills cartoony serial characters, but basically that's it. So basically, my guys are the FBI agents that are deputized to go out there and enforce the law.
And that is available now on Kickstarter.
Yes, we are G-Man Comics. We have a website, g-man-comics.com, and that will have a link that will take you to the Kickstarter. We're on Kickstarter. You can just search for us, called G-Man Comics. Okay. And it's G-Men Unleashed is this campaign. And we got a cool video you might enjoy too.
All right. Well, Rick, thank you very, very much for coming on and talking about your work. It's always a pleasure talking with you, bud.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
And good luck. Congratulations on your 7th Kickstarter, and I hope it does wonders for you.
Well, thank you.
And for everybody watching, everybody listening, this is Rik Offenberger. Check him out here. You can also check out firstcomicsnews.com if you want to actually check out some of the other things he does in comics. Beyond all that, that Thursday, Amy Beckinsale joins the show, and then I'm off to When Worlds Collide, and I'm doing more of my roadshow there. So that'll be this week. So for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. Stay inspired, keep shining in the dark, and I'll see you guys next time.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, hit the